Dads, do you want a thriving business that doesn't control you? A passionate marriage and kids that adore you? Do you want to grow deeper in your faith? Be healthier, both physically and mentally? Build more meaningful relationships with your friends? Welcome to the Balanced Business Dad podcast, where in each episode we dive into balancing and optimizing the 6 pillars of life: faith, health, marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and business. And here are your hosts, pioneers of the Balanced Business Dad movement, Dustin Hogue and RJ Campbell.
Hey, what is going on, guys? It's Dustin here with another episode of the Balanced Business Dad. As always, I'm with my co-host, my esteemed colleague, my much senior colleague, Mr. RJ Campbell. RJ, how are you doing today?
Doing wonderful. It's a beautiful Monday morning here in St. Louis. Spring is on the way. We're going to be in the 70s.
It is going to be 73 today and 45 tomorrow. So we got to love the Midwest.
Welcome to the
yes.
Midwest.
Guys, we are in for a treat today. You know, sometimes you just feel like there is people out there that are on your same mission in life and you don't know them. Through this podcast, through a lot of this, we're able to meet some of these other men out there that are kind of on the same path as we are, I think, and trying to serve the same community, which, as you know, we're here to serve the dads and the business dads out there. So, guys, I have somebody who is on that same mission as well, which I absolutely love. So, Mr. Corey Rankin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So, Corey, we just got to know you a little bit right before we started hit record here, but what I would love to do is just tell the people who you are today, you know, you, your family, that kind of thing. And then how did you get to where you are today? Because it sounds like quite a story.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share that. The short answer is the Lord. And the more detailed answer is my wife and I, we've been married. May will be 15 years. We've got 5 kids who are ages 4, 6, 6, 7, and 10. All 5 of them are adopted through foster care. My wife and I just recently moved from Vegas to Texas. But in Vegas, we spent the last 10 years as foster parents, cared for over 30 children. And I've done a lot of good for those children that cared for them. But really, they've done a lot of good for me because of the 30 children that I've been able to care for. I've learned to love at a level deeper than most. And so my journey as an entrepreneur started with the tragedy in Vegas in 2017. Don't necessarily need to go into details about the tragedy, but there was a major tragedy in our community that overwhelmed the hospitals at a great capacity. That night of this tragedy, my wife was working at the hospital, and it was really challenging, and it was a rough day. And she got an impression from the Lord that day that your mission in life was to save families. And that was confusing for us because I was in physical therapy school. She was a nurse. She was continuing her education to become a marriage and family therapist in preparation for grad school. We were active at church. We were active at the community. We'd been 5 years of foster parenting at that time. And so for us, we thought we were saving families and serving, but for 2 years, we didn't know what that meant. We continued to rely on the Lord and move forward in faith. And in 2019, while I was at a business physical therapy conference, my wife was with me. We got the impression the time is now. And we're like, the time is now for what? So in Clearwater, Florida, without the kids, on the beach, we were just praying and asking the Lord what to do, what the time is now for. So we did not touch foot on the beautiful beach of Clearwater, Florida, because we were trying to figure out what to do. After hours and hours of prayer in the hotel, we joined the mastermind that was available there, and that was the start of our entrepreneur journey. We initially thought we would serve children, parenting as our thing, but that wasn't it. Like, every conversation about parenting just felt like something was missing. And as we learned more and dove in, we started to serve married couples who were closer to divorce. Because the world is under attack, families are being destroyed left and right. And so we're like, all right, we're going to dive into this. We're going to make impact there. And after a short period of time, 3 months of that, we got another impression that we started serving entrepreneurs who were struggling in their marriage. And as things progressed, we settled and the Lord put us in our place that was really a sweet spot for us. serving entrepreneur couples who still liked each other, just the business was taking over. Serving couples who still were not talking about divorce, who were not putting each other down, was so much more rewarding. And so that's where we were for the last 4 years, serving entrepreneur couples who the business was disrupting the marriage, was taking the dad, mom, whoever away from the kids, away from home. And then Thanksgiving of last year, I got another impression that I needed to do more to serve dads. And so I spent the holidays figuring out what that looked like, praying, and now to some additional life circumstances, my wife was not as available to serve the couples with me because she's now a marriage therapist and that was her passion. And so now I serve dads. 100% I focus on serving dads, help elevate men to be more intentional, present fathers. Of my 5 kids, 5 different dads, not a single one of them had a father present. Very few of the kids that I cared for in foster care, their father was present. So between 10 years of foster care and my experience as seeing absent dads as entrepreneurs who are committed to their family, they're just not available because they're grinding so much in the business. And then a job that I worked before, I was a physical therapist. I was a care provider for disabled adults. And so I've seen so much experience in my life where dad's present, kids are loved in the home, feel confident. That's a significantly better outcome than the dad who's not present or the dad who's not emotionally available for his kids or is just so caught up in the business. And so I am on a mission to help children have the dads that they need to help families stay together from being a more intentional present father. And that has elevated my game as a father. I thought I was a good dad and was very intentional, but now I've taken that to a new level. And the Lord has qualified me as an individual to increase my capacity to do more and serve more. And so that's where I am now, serving dads and helping children have the connection that is ultimately, when it's all said and done, I want my kids, I want your kids, and I want the kids of the world to have confidence, to have people they trust, to be able to avoid the stigma of dads can't show emotion, you're weak if you have feelings or whatever. But I want my children to be confident, to have courage, to be able to know that I'm there for them when they're sad, when they're frustrated, help them make good decisions and really just live a life of service and impact.
Amen.
That's amazing. I heard so much in that when you talk about the messages from God guiding you along the way. We have the old expression that man plans and God laughs. So you have this this career and this journey that you're on, and you're both serving. Your wife's a nurse, and you're in physical therapy, and you're fostering children, and then you're working on marriages. But you keep getting the message from God saying, "No, I think you need to work on serving people better." It's like, well, how can I serve any more than I am? And it's taken years down the road of more communications and messages from God. But now I look back on that and hearing your story and think, that was just God preparing you this entire time. No, can't do it yet. You need to foster 20 more kids. You're learning as you go through this process. Everything was just building throughout your life to get you to this point. It's kind of outside of that. We get frustrated because God doesn't answer our prayers fast enough, or we don't understand what He wants us to do. But, well, there you go. There's a very long journey. We're impatient. He isn't. And He was just prepping you this entire time to start this journey you have now, this mission that's so similar to ours of working with entrepreneurial dads and just giving you all that background.
It goes even deeper than that because I know I don't actually do anything in physical therapy anymore. I have a doctorate of physical therapy, but that 2018 was when I was getting ready and studying for my physical therapy exam. So you're absolutely right. God was preparing me because I actually almost nearly failed out of physical therapy school. And I was really frustrated about that because I was like, I'm doing what you're calling me to do. And it took me 13 years in preparation for a doctorate of physical therapy. By the time I graduated high school, and I spent 2 years as a missionary and did my undergrad and then more prereqs and grad school. So it took me 13 years to earn my doctorate in physical therapy. And then I never even became a licensed physical therapist. God took me away. My student loans were more than my mortgage in Vegas, and I never once practiced as a physical therapist.
But we can call you Dr. Corey Rankin.
You could, but doctor doesn't serve me so much in serving the dads, and so I don't really go by it, because I guess if I were to be called a doctor, it's doctoring the hearts of the children and not any other doctor that they would be called. But as I have severe sleep apnea, and I didn't know it until my first year in physical therapy school. I had a seizure. I stopped breathing in the middle of the night, and my wife had to call the ambulance. And that was how I figured out I had severe sleep apnea. But that episode happened 3 days before one of my neuro exams. And I was so foolish that I was like, oh, I got this. I took my exam, failed it miserably. I had a headache. I couldn't think. It was horrible. But anyways, that led me to failing a class in physical therapy. So I had to take a break. I had to join the class behind me. And so I had to take a whole year off because I couldn't progress without the step-by-step. But that failing, which was so precious, because at first I was not angry at God, but angry at the circumstances. But me failing out meant that I wasn't able to go on rotations with my classmates. I had to stay back and finish that class. And so we had a new instructor that came into our program that wasn't assigned any students yet because he came mid-semester. While my classmates were on their first rotation, I was going one-on-one, redoing my class. But that was actually a godsend, because in that period of time, we were really in an ugly battle in foster care for my oldest son, and I was in court every other week. And failing allowed me to have the freedom, the flexibility to be in court. Had I been on my rotation, which would have been the normal schedule, I wouldn't have been able to be in court. I would have had to miss a lot of that. And me not being in court could have potentially led to a different outcome by my son returning home. And so that was the first step of God's progression. And I thought this whole time, well, couldn't I just skip physical therapy and gone straight to entrepreneurship? But no, because if I skip physical therapy school, I never go from Utah to Vegas, which is where all 5 of my kids were adopted from. The guy that hosted the business conference was an introduction from one of my classmates. And so without physical therapy school, I don't go to Vegas where my kids were adopted. I don't go to this business conference, so where my exposure entrepreneur came. And some of my deepest friends came from that initial mastermind in the physical therapy world. So my largest network is healthcare providers that I no longer even provide any healthcare.
Wow, what a story. There was something that you had mentioned earlier, how you thought, you were a good father, you were present, things like that. And this journey has allowed you to build a more capacity around it while you're serving other dads and things like that. And I absolutely love that, because I heard a quote a long time ago: if you want to get really good at something, teach it. Right? So because you're wanting to show up as an expert to serve other dads, your capacity has raised as a dad. And I absolutely love that. And I think that's amazing. Obviously, God called you to this world. How was it for you, if we can go there? Because I'm so curious how you were led down this path of even foster. My best friend's, he has 10 siblings and they're all adopted. Well, I'm number 10. I'm not adopted, but they call me their child. And so I guess there was 9 of them all adopted, and they were foster parents as well. How did you guys go down that path? What led you down to that path? Like, how was your journey, as a kid, or, when you and your wife got married, did you know you were going to go down this path?
So more God intervention. So I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one day we were at one of their open houses for one of their temples, a new temple in Utah. And as we were going through this open house tour, my wife got another impression that you need to adopt. We're year and a half into our marriage at this time. And as soon as she told me that, my exact response was, you got to be kidding me, because we were not planning on children. So let me back up a little bit before that. So my aunt, she had 4 boys, 1 biological, 3 were adopted. So adoption has been I've been exposed to adoption my whole life. And so my cousins are just a few years younger than me. So I've been exposed to adoption my whole life. And come full circle, her kids were actually adopted through the Vegas foster care system. And so that's some connection there too. But as we got that impression, she came to me and said, we need to adopt. And I said, you're kidding me. And I pushed it off. And that impression came back 6 more times before we were finally like, okay, we're going to stop being foolish and be humble and go to what the Lord wanted us to do. And so we did. We went through all these family services initially and started the preparation for adoption. And we thought that meant that adoption would come right away. It didn't. And we had some few failed adoptions. We became licensed as foster parents in Utah, but working full-time, going to school full-time, we never took any placements. And so now we moved to Vegas for physical therapy school. We quickly become foster parents there. We moved to Vegas in June of 2012. By December of 2012, we were licensed foster parents. I got a call December 27th from my licensing worker saying that your license is active, you're good to start taking calls. I went to play racquetball. So that was in the morning. I went to play racquetball in the afternoon. In the 2 hours I was playing racquetball, I got 2 calls for placements of kids that needed care. That was what got us started in foster care, is the Lord. My refusal
Absolutely.
to be humble and do what he wanted me to do, because we weren't even thinking about children. And as we became foster parents, we started having kids. There was some infertility, but that was not even known until far after the fact that we had these kids in our home, stuff like that. And so we've never had any pregnancies or anything. It's all straight been adoption. And our family, we just barely finalized the adoption of my daughter in June of last year after 4+ year court battle in the foster care system. And so when we finalized her adoption, we didn't feel like our family was complete, but we also didn't feel like it wasn't complete. So now that we're in Texas, we're waiting for more instruction from the Lord. If our family was complete with 5 kids, I'd be more than happy with that, because that's plenty to handle. But if the Lord had more for us, then I will quickly obey what the Lord wants me to do for his children.
Amazing. I love it. What a story. And then you go into this entrepreneur world. So did you grow up around entrepreneurs? Did you grow up around coach? So I coach a lot of people as well, and I've been so exposed to that. But it sounds like you God said, hey, you're going to be a coach, and you said yes without having much exposure to it.
So you're absolutely right. My dad had a pathetic business when I was growing up, and my uncle owned his own plumbing business that I worked a lot with through high school, but I was more just a laborer. I didn't really know anything about the business. And what I mean by my dad had a pathetic business is he had an LLC that, for tax purposes, he intended to have it get a loss every year. And I don't know why he didn't actually just make a business of it instead of just casually carrying a LLC that was worthless. But that's aside the point. So he was not a good example of an entrepreneur. I barely even knew he had a business, because he would do my taxes and would do other people's taxes. But other than that, he never committed to an actual business. And so my only real exposure to entrepreneurship was through my uncle, and then through the physical therapy world. As I joined that mastermind, the community was other healthcare professionals that were starting or growing their clinic, that were becoming online entrepreneurs. So really my first true exposure was 2018 at that physical therapy conference.
Wow.
Yeah, that is funny as we forget about that in the healthcare world. We think of entrepreneurs and plumbers and roofers and HVAC service industries like that, real estate. But we've had other people that we've talked to on the podcast. We forget that healthcare practitioners, for the most part, they're entrepreneurs. I mean, not the ones working directly in a hospital there, but all these doctors, all these physical therapists, all these chiropractors that own their own practices, they're all entrepreneurs. Just kind of forget about that whole realm of it out there that are the same thing. They're more entrepreneur dads. trusted that everybody needs to talk to.
And so I've had an entrepreneur spirit because while I was going to physical therapy school, my conversations with my wife were always, when I own my clinic, we're going to do this. Like, I never was planning to be an entrepreneur, and I never had a goal 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I just knew that eventually I wasn't going to be satisfied with other people's rules and the way other people tell me to treat. So it was kind of just a natural progression. Like, I love to serve at such a high level. I love connection. So our conversations were always when I have my clinic. So that wasn't so much an entrepreneur mindset. At least it wasn't then. Now I can look back and be like, okay, that was preparation, that the Lord was preparing me not to stay in a scarcity mindset, but have the capacity to be in abundance. Because I always talked about having my own clinic, and my wife always talked about her clinic as a therapist. And so we didn't have the words to describe that. We didn't know entrepreneurship. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know the freedom that that could establish. And I used to be all in, go to school, go to college. Education is super important. I still am. Education is super important, but skip that. Become an entrepreneur. Only go to school now if you want to be a doctor or if you need some sort of license. Then college is still necessary. But anything that I'm doing now to serve my family, I didn't learn from college. I learned from connection, from mentors as an entrepreneur. And I've actually become a better dad because of entrepreneurship. Several entrepreneurs that are mentors or friends or colleagues have control of their time, control of their financial freedom because of what they've established as an entrepreneur, which has allowed them to be in the home. In physical therapy, I still love it, but it wasn't for me because the job I had waiting for me once I passed my exam was Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 to 8, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 6, Fridays till 4, and Saturdays till 2. And I would have been in the clinic the majority of that time by myself. I mean, not all of those hours, but most of it. And that wasn't what I wanted. But now I'm home to take my kids to school. I'm home to pick them up. I'm at every single practice, at every single game, unless my kids have practice at the same time, then I have to split up. But that's just a scheduling thing and not an availability thing. But as an entrepreneur, I can control my schedule and I can be there for my kids. And that is something I didn't know my kids needed because they're adopted through foster care. So they've needed additional therapies, speech, counseling, different concerns like that. Like my oldest son was abandoned at Walmart at 7 months old. So he had a lot of adults fail him. So I needed to be there more heavily for my son as he struggled through school, as he needed to know that his dad was there, that on the long hours when I was working or in school and I was on those rotations, he would ask my wife, where am I? Or when I'm at the school library studying this whole time, as a 4-year-old, my son's like, where's daddy? He didn't have the comprehension to know that I just wasn't home. Doesn't mean I was gone. So he had so many adults fail him. And then my daughter, she came to us 2 weeks after her second birthday. We were already her 6th placement. So she had no clue of stranger danger. She was bounced around from place to place to place. And she had such fear of being left or whatever. Like for the first several months of my daughter coming into my home, if she was on the inside of the home and the front door was closed and I was on the porch, she would flip out because she didn't have any stability. And so I could not be as available as my children needed working a regular job. But now, as an entrepreneur, I can be there. Any school activity, a daddy-daughter date, come see my school party, whatever. Oftentimes, a dad who has a 9-to-5 or some other corporate job rarely gets those. Occasionally, they'll be able to schedule time off or whatever. But for the most part, those are things that are missed. Those are things that seem unimportant, but for the kids, they really mean a lot. They don't often verbalize what that means, but with the other kids, their parents, their mom is there, and they constantly, nobody's showing up for them, especially children who've had that abandonment through foster care, and nobody shows up for him. Nobody shows up for him. They start to wonder, was I'm just not good enough?
Right.
They have their people showing up. I don't have anyone showing up for me. Like, is that my problem? Am I not good enough? And the answer is no, but that's their mindset sometimes. Not any fault of their own, but that's just kind of the way that it happens. So entrepreneur has been a huge blessing for me, for my family, even though I didn't understand it when the Lord initially pulled me into that career.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What a story. What an amazing work you and your wife are doing. I've seen a lot of that. Again, my best friend and his family have done that. So I don't say I understand it, but I've definitely seen it, is how I'll put it. And I know what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And I thank God that, people in this world are like you and your wife to do things like that, because it's amazing. I love that you've stepped into the entrepreneur role. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and you're so right that other people, when they are tied to that job where you have to be somewhere at a certain time, they don't get the ability to go spend time at the school, and even if they are at practices after school, it's hard because they had to work, 10 hours that day before they got to come home. So I love it. I love that you've seen what the blessing an entrepreneur does, and what an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful that we were able to have this time to meet, because this was a fantastic story.
Well, it goes even deeper than that, because when I was in physical therapy school, oftentimes I would drop the kids off at daycare. They would be asleep before I came home from studying. Actually, they would bring a Tupperware dish, and I'd eat dinner with them real quick in the parking lot some nights. And then I'd be in the library studying. My wife would be asleep on the couch waiting for me. Like, people in my life were waiting for me. I just wasn't available. But in the last 4 years, I hear all the time, especially from my two oldest, "Daddy, you're the best. You're the best dad. You're the world's best." And my younger dad kids call me a fix-it daddy, because I'm very handy and I'm intentional on when I fix things or build things that they're involved in. So those words were not coming out of my kid's mouth 4 years ago, that I was the best dad, that I'm the fix-it daddy, that they really love that I'm there. Because I was around, but I wouldn't consider myself being present before being an entrepreneur, because I wasn't available when they needed me. And so that's a huge difference just in 4 years, that the language that my kids use to describe me as a dad has significantly changed. And that goes for so many children. While they're on the playground, they're talking about you in two ways as a dad. Either my dad's the cool dad, meaning that he's present, he's available, he attends my activities, I get time with him, or he's a no-show dad. He works too much. He doesn't know my friends. I can't talk to him. And so whether they use those words or not, that's what's happening on the playground. They're talking to their friends. My dad's cool. He's there. He's available. I want to be with him. Or he's a no-show. Can I come to your house? Can I hang out with you and your dad? And that was something I recognized was a trend that I didn't want. And I refuse to ever get back to that space where my kids even have to question if I'm available for them. Like, even as an entrepreneur, my office is in my room and I work with my door open. If my door is open, they're invited in. The only time I close my door is if I'm on a coaching call or a podcast or something like that, where I just need a few moments to be quiet without disruption. But they know that if my door is open and I'm working, they can come in. That's not usually the case, because usually I don't work when they're home. But if I am, something after school or whatever, if my door's open, they come in, give me help. Even if I'm on a coaching call or something like that, they crawl right up on my lap and join me in the Zoom call. Like, they're what matters most to me. And so I create my schedule, my calendar around them. And a lot of people, their business is first and family second. But for me, the Lord and my family is first, and everything else after that. And with that pattern, I'm a much better entrepreneur because my capacity is better. I'm more effective when I'm wearing the hat of entrepreneur versus scattered everywhere. And so, yeah, for me, the language around being a dad has changed once I become an entrepreneur in the minds of my kids.
So great. This is one of probably the very first time I've ever heard how entrepreneurship has given you back balance. And which is kind of interesting. We've never really went down that path, but entrepreneurship and being a business dad can actually give you balance versus some of those careers where you're tied to the job. So I love it, giving that balance so you can be there for your kids and your kids recognize that because they do. So I love it, Corey. This was an amazing conversation. Where can the dads out here find you?
So I'm getting ready to do with the transition from married couples to dads. I'm having a 5-day challenge coming up on March 20th. And you can register for that at dadsunleashed.com/present. So that was dadsunleashed.com/present.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Awesome.
And do you do that multiple times throughout the year?
It's going to be a monthly challenge. The first one is going to be March 20th, and then the one in April is going to be the third week of April, and then it's on the calendar for May. And people can find it regularly.
And people can find all that on the website on Dads Unleashed.
Okay. Perfect. We'll make sure we have that. Again, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I know Corey brought a lot to the table and just an amazing person out there doing amazing things. So, RJ, go ahead and close us out.
Yeah. As I always say, guys, thanks so much for listening. We love bringing this podcast to you. All we ask on a favor in return is rate it, because that gets the podcast shown so more dads can find us. And if you want to continue conversations and see what we're doing, the easiest way is on Facebook. We have a free group that is coincidentally titled The Balanced Business Dad. So search that on Facebook and you'll find the group. It's public. So ask for an invite. We'll bring you in. We probably have about 300 dads that are hanging out on that group. Put content out there and tease things about the podcast. You'll get information there. And of course, thebalancedbusinessdad.com is our website. All of the podcasts are there if you want to go back, if you're listening to them there, as opposed to on a regular, one of the big podcast providers. And Dustin will probably talk a little bit about the Dad Up Council, which is the next level of what we're providing.
Yeah, guys, we do have the Business Dad Mastermind out there, which is the Dad Up Council. You can talk to RJ and I through Facebook on that. Just go to the Balanced Business Dad. You can find us there. We do have the Business Dads Retreat coming up, which is going to be the first weekend of May. So that's May 5th through the 7th in beautiful Lesterville, Missouri, which is about 2 hours south of St. Louis, Missouri. So pretty easy flight into St. Louis and then a quick drive down to the beautiful countryside of that on a campground. So we're out in the wilderness and it'll be a good time. So you'll start seeing more invites for that coming out soon, as well as you can go to the dadupcouncil.com and learn more about the Business Dad Mastermind we have. Guys, that's what we have today. Again, thank you so much. Thank you, Corey. And just everybody stay balanced out there.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.